You met someone once, decided in about 4 seconds exactly who they were, and you have quietly been right about them ever since. Maybe they were arrogant, maybe they were charming, maybe you swiped left or right on the strength of a single glance and a single sentence. We all do it. We are wired to do it. And 200 years ago, a young woman in an English country village wrote an entire novel to warn you that the confident little verdict you just handed down might be completely, disastrously wrong. On the surface, this is a love story, and one of the most beloved ever written. But underneath the ballrooms and the banter, it is something sharper. A study of how two intelligent, well-meaning people looked straight at each other and both got it exactly backwards. Because one of them was too proud to be read, and the other was too quick to think she had already read him. This is the story of how they were both wrong, how much it nearly cost them, and how the hardest thing a proud person can ever say is not, "I love you." It is, "I was wrong." The book is Pride and Prejudice, published in 1813 by Jane Austen, a clergyman's daughter who never married, never travelled far, and wrote in a quiet sitting room where she is said to have hidden her pages whenever a visitor came in. She lived in a world with almost no exit for a woman without money. A daughter could not inherit her father's estate, could not earn a real living, could not simply strike out on her own. Marriage was not only romance, it was economics, security, survival, the single financial decision on which a woman's entire future turned. And Austen opens her novel by putting that brutal truth into the most famous, most deceptively sweet sentence in English literature. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Read it once and it sounds charming. Read it again and you hear the blade inside the velvet, because it is not really the man who is in want. It is every family with unmarried daughters and no fortune to leave them. Austen is smiling at you while she shows you the trap. That double edge is the whole book, a comedy of manners laid over a hard, clear-eyed reckoning with money, class, and the very small set of choices a clever woman was actually allowed to make. Here is the whole novel in one sentence. A sharp-tongued country girl and a proud, wealthy man both mistake their first impressions for the truth, and only after each of them has swallowed a great deal of pride do they discover that the person worth loving was standing in front of them the entire time. Our heroine is Elizabeth Bennet, witty, fearless, the second of 5 daughters in a family that will lose everything to a distant male cousin when their father dies, because the estate is entailed away from the women. The man is Mr. Darcy, immensely rich, master of a vast estate, socially awkward, and, at their first meeting, insufferably proud. She decides in one evening that he is the most arrogant man she has ever met. He decides she is merely tolerable and beneath his notice. And out of those 2 snap judgments, Austen builds a story that is really about self-knowledge, about how our pride and our prejudice work together to keep us from seeing anyone, including ourselves, as they truly are. Notice that the title names 2 faults, not one, and it never tells you which belongs to whom, because the point is that both characters carry both. Darcy has the obvious pride of rank. Elizabeth has the subtler pride of intelligence, the certainty that she reads people correctly. Each has a prejudice to match. We will walk it in 5 beats. In want of a wife, first impressions, the proposal, knowing yourself, and second chances. First, the marriage market. When a rich, single young man named Bingley rents a nearby estate, Mrs. Bennet is almost undone with excitement, because a wealthy husband for even one of her 5 daughters could rescue the whole family. At the ball, where the neighbourhood gathers to inspect the newcomers, Bingley is warm and delighted with everyone, and his even richer friend, Mr. Darcy, stands apart, cold and silent, refusing to dance, radiating contempt for the provincial company. Elizabeth overhears him decline to be introduced to her. She is tolerable, he says, but not handsome enough to tempt him. In 4 seconds, the verdict is delivered, on both sides. He has filed her under beneath his notice. She has filed him under proud, disagreeable, and thoroughly unpleasant. And here is the modern nerve Austen touches. This is a novel about the violence of the first impression, the same instant, confident sorting we do every day on a dating app, in a job interview, in the first 30 seconds of meeting anyone. We tell ourselves we are reading people. Usually we are only reading the surface and calling it insight. Elizabeth prides herself on being an excellent judge of character. It is the very thing she is best at, and it is exactly the thing that is about to betray her. Because the sharper you believe your judgment is, the less likely you are to notice when it is wrong. Austen sets the trap early, and she baits it with our own cleverness. Second, first impressions harden into a story. Enter Mr. Wickham, handsome, easy, charming, a soldier with a wounded look and a smooth tongue. He tells Elizabeth that Darcy cruelly cheated him out of an inheritance their fathers had intended for him, and she believes every word, instantly and completely. Why? Partly because Wickham is agreeable and Darcy is not. Partly because it confirms exactly what she already decided at that first ball. A charming lie that flatters what you already believe will always feel more true than an inconvenient fact. And Wickham is fluent in the oldest trick there is. He agrees with you about yourself. Notice what is really happening. Elizabeth is not weighing evidence, she is collecting proof for a conclusion she reached before she had any. Every new detail gets bent to fit the story she likes. Darcy proud and villainous, Wickham wronged and good. This is the deep psychology Austen is quietly diagramming, that flattery makes us stupid, that we are most easily fooled by the people who tell us we were right all along, and that a first impression is not really an observation at all. It is a hypothesis we then spend all our energy trying to confirm. The tragedy and the comedy is that the more intelligent you are, the better you get at building an airtight case for something that simply is not so. Elizabeth's mind is her glory, and here her prison, because she has too much wit and not yet enough humility to doubt herself. Third, the proposal, the hinge on which the whole novel turns. Against everything he believes about rank and family and good sense, Darcy has fallen helplessly in love with Elizabeth, and he arrives to tell her so. But he cannot do it cleanly. He proposes and insults her in the same breath, dwelling on how far beneath him she is, how her family embarrasses him, how hard he has fought his own feelings. "Ardently I admire and love you," he says, and then explains, at length, why he wishes he did not. The words Austen gives him are unforgettable. "In vain I have struggled. It will not do. My feelings will not be repressed. You must allow me to tell you how ardently I admire and love you." And Elizabeth, blazing, refuses him, not gently, but with every accusation she has stored up. His arrogance, his cruelty to Wickham, his ruin of her sister's romance. It is a catastrophe. He proposes marriage and manages to humiliate her whole family while doing it. She rejects him and flings his own supposed crimes in his face. Two proud people at their absolute worst. And then Darcy does the one thing that changes everything. He writes her a letter. Calmly, he lays out the truth about Wickham, who is not the wronged innocent, but a liar and a fortune hunter, and about her family's genuine impropriety. He does not beg. He simply tells her what actually happened and leaves. This is the modern lesson buried in a Regency proposal. The hardest sentence in the world is not, "I love you." It is, "I was wrong about you." And the letter forces Elizabeth, for the first time, to consider that she might have been the wrong one all along. Fourth, the reckoning. The quiet moment when a person actually changes. Elizabeth reads the letter once in fury, then again, and slowly, agonizingly, the story she has told herself for months begins to collapse. Every proof she gathered against Darcy dissolves. Every charm she credited to Wickham turns to smoke. She sees, for the first time, that she was not the clear-eyed judge of character she prided herself on being, but a vain woman who mistook her own prejudice for perception, who was flattered into folly by a handsome liar and blinded into cruelty by wounded pride. And Austen gives her one of the most honest lines any character has ever spoken about themselves. "Till this moment, I never knew myself." This is the beating heart of the book, and it is not romantic, it is moral. Real change, Austen insists, is not a grand public gesture. It is a private, humiliating hour spent alone with the evidence, admitting to no one but yourself that you were the fool. Nobody is watching Elizabeth in that field as she rereads the letter. There is no audience for her transformation, no apology owed to a crowd. The work of becoming a better person happens exactly where no one can see it, in the silent, unflattering recognition that the villain of your story might have been you. Darcy is doing the same work, off the page, in the same lonely way, taking her furious accusations to heart, softening his manner, quietly becoming a man worth loving. Neither of them changes to win the other. They change, first, alone. Fifth, second chances. Love as something built, not something struck like lightning. Months later, chance brings Elizabeth to Darcy's great estate, where she sees him transformed, gracious, generous, kind to his servants and to her humble relatives, the pride worn away to reveal the decent man underneath. And then he acts. When her reckless youngest sister runs off with Wickham and threatens to disgrace the entire family, it is Darcy who quietly hunts them down, pays Wickham's debts, and forces the marriage that saves the Bennets' name. And he does it in secret, wanting no credit, expecting nothing in return. That is love that has grown up, not a spark, but a choice, made in private, at cost, for someone else's sake. When they finally come together, it is not the couple from the first ball. It is two people who have each been humbled, each been changed, each learned to see the other clearly at last. And Austen, for all her sharpness, lets her heroine keep her laughter. Elizabeth famously asks, "For what do we live but to make sport for our neighbours and laugh at them in our turn?" She is wiser now, but she has not gone solemn. She has simply learned to turn that clever, teasing eye on herself as readily as on everyone else. That is the mature love the novel argues for. Not the electric certainty of a first impression, but the slow, patient recalibration of really coming to know a person and choosing to love who they actually turned out to be. So what does all of it add up to? Pride and Prejudice is remembered as the perfect romance, and it is one. But Austen was doing something more exacting than giving us a happy ending. She was anatomizing the two forces named in her title and showing how they feed each other. Darcy's pride made him unreadable, so he came across as cold and cruel when he was only shy and out of his depth. Elizabeth's prejudice made her a bad reader, so she trusted the charming liar and condemned the honest man. Pride distorts how we are seen, prejudice distorts how we see. And between those two distortions, two people who were quietly right for each other spent half a book being catastrophically wrong. The love story only becomes possible when each of them does the unglamorous work the modern world is worst at, doubting their own first read, admitting they misjudged, and choosing to look again. Notice that no one is rescued by fate here. There is no thunderbolt, no destiny, no single perfect moment that fixes everything. What fixes it is character, the willingness on both sides to be wrong, to grow, and to try again with clearer eyes. That is why the book has outlived 2 centuries of romances that promised love at first sight. Austen never believed in love at first sight. She believed in love at second sight. The kind you only earn after the first impression has been proven a lie. Here is the one thing to carry out of this book and into your week. Catch yourself in the act of the 4-second verdict. You will do it today, about a stranger, a co-worker, a face on a screen, someone whose single sentence you are about to convert into a whole character. That instant confidence feels like insight. Austen spent a masterpiece proving it is usually just the surface, dressed up as understanding. So this week, when you feel that quick, satisfying certainty snap into place about who someone is, try treating it not as a conclusion, but as a guess, a first impression you owe yourself the humility to test. Ask what you might be reading into them from your own mood, your own pride, your own need to be right. Notice when someone is agreeable simply because they are telling you what you already believe, and be a little suspicious of how good that feels. And when the evidence eventually shows you that you called it wrong, about a person, a situation, yourself, practice saying the sentence Elizabeth had to learn, the one our age treats as defeat. I was wrong. Till this moment I never knew myself is not a line about romance. It is what growth actually sounds like. The private, unwitnessed moment when you stop defending the story you told and finally look at the person, or the truth, standing in front of you. Do that even once this week, and you will have understood Jane Austen better than 1,000 people who only remember the wedding. Jane Austen spends her whole novel making one quietly radical case: that the confident first impression, the thing we trust most, is the thing that most often lies to us, and that love, real love, only begins where pride and prejudice end. Elizabeth and Darcy do not fall in love because they were fated to. They earn each other by each becoming someone new. A proud man who learns to be read, a clever woman who learns to doubt her own cleverness. That is the quiet revolution hidden inside the most beloved romance in the language. It is not about finding the right person, it is about becoming a person who can finally see one. If this walk through Pride and Prejudice gave you something worth keeping, subscribe. A new classic every week, faithfully, in about 20 minutes. Next time, we cross into a storm-lit laboratory for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. the story that asks who the real monster is when a creator abandons the thing he made. And tell me in the comments, when has a first impression turned out to be completely, embarrassingly wrong, and what changed your mind?